The dust kicked up around Martha Hayes's worn boots as she stepped off the stagecoach in Angels Camp, California. Her needle case clutched tight against her chest like a shield, and she wondered if this desperate venture to mend clothes for a ranch bunkhouse would finally give her the fresh start she needed after burying her father 3 months prior. The September heat of 1878 pressed down on her shoulders as she surveyed the rough mining town that had seen better days since the gold rush fever had cooled. Her advertisement in the San Francisco newspaper had yielded exactly one response. A cattle ranch 15 miles outside town needed someone to mend, and so for their crew of 12 cowboys. The pay was modest, but included room and board, which was more than she had back in Sacramento, where the boarding house rent had eaten through her father's meager savings. Martha adjusted her bonnet and picked up her single trunk, grateful she had packed light. At 22, she had learned to carry only what she could manage alone. The general store owner had given her directions to wait outside the livery stable where someone from the Double D Ranch would collect her. She did not have to wait long. A wagon rumbled down the dirt street, driven by a weathered man with a gray beard and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he spotted her. "You the seamstress?" he called out, pulling the horses to a stop. "Yes, sir. Martha Hayes, name's Dutch, foreman at the Double D. Boss said you would be arriving today." He climbed down with surprising agility for his age and lifted her trunk into the wagon bed like it weighed nothing. "Climb on up, Miss Hayes. We have about an hour's ride ahead of us." The landscape opened up as they left town, rolling hills giving way to sprawling pastures where cattle grazed in the late afternoon sun. Dutch kept up a steady stream of conversation, explaining that the ranch had been established by Daniel Drummond's father 20 years ago, and that the current owner ran a tight but fair operation. "You will have your own room in the main house," Dutch said, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. "The boss's wife passed 2 years back, so it has been just him and his daughter living there. Clara's 16, sweet girl. She helps with the cooking, but neither of them knows the first thing about mending clothes. The boys have been walking around in shirts more patch than fabric." Martha listened, filing away the information. A widower and his daughter, a dozen cowboys. She could handle that. She had been mending her father's veterinary practice clothes since she was 10, and had taken in sewing from neighbors to make ends meet after his health declined. The ranch buildings came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch, freshly painted white with green trim. The bunkhouse sat about 50 yards away, a long, low building with smoke curling from its chimney. Beyond that stood the barn, corrals, and various outbuildings that spoke of a prosperous operation. Dutch pulled the wagon up to the main house, just as a young girl with blonde braids came running out, followed by a tall man with dark hair graying at the temples. "You must be Miss Hayes," the man said, extending his hand. "Daniel Drummond, welcome to the Double D." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Drummond. Let me show you to your room. Supper's in an hour. We eat with the hands in the bunkhouse, more practical that way." Clara helped carry Martha's things upstairs to a small but clean room with a window overlooking the corrals. The girl chattered cheerfully about how excited she was to have another woman in the house, and how the cowboys had been complaining about their threadbare clothes for months. "Father kept saying he would find someone, but I think he forgot until last month when Jake's shirt literally fell apart during dinner," Clara giggled. "The poor man had to hold it together with his hands until he could get back to the bunkhouse." Martha unpacked her sewing supplies and changed into a fresh dress, though it was nearly as worn as the one she had traveled in. She owned 3 dresses total, all of them mended multiple times. Perhaps once she received her first wages, she could afford fabric for something new. The bunkhouse was warm and smelled of coffee and beef stew. Long tables filled the center of the room with benches on either side. The cowboys were already gathering, most of them nodding politely as Martha entered with Clara and Mr. Drummond. They were a mix of ages, from boys barely old enough to shave to grizzled men who had clearly spent decades in the saddle. Dutch introduced them one by one, and Martha tried to memorize names and faces. There was Tommy, the youngest at 18, with red hair and freckles. Frank and Pete were brothers in their 30s, both built like bulls. Old Charlie claimed to be pushing 70, but still worked as hard as any man half his age. Jake was the one whose shirt had fallen apart, a jovial man in his 40s who laughed easily. Then Dutch gestured to the far end of the table where a man sat slightly apart from the others. "And that's Zachary Dalton. Goes by Zach. He's our best bronc buster and tracker." Martha's eyes met Zachary's across the room and something shifted in the air. He was younger than most of the crew, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. Where the other men had called out greetings or waved, Zachary simply nodded once, his expression unreadable. She nodded back and took her seat next to Clara, trying to ignore the way her pulse had quickened. Supper was hearty and plentiful. The cowboys ate with the efficiency of men who worked hard for their meals, and the conversation flowed around topics Martha barely understood. Fence lines and water rights, a particularly ornery bull, plans for the fall roundup. She noticed that Zachary spoke only when directly addressed, his responses brief and measured. After the meal, Mr. Drummond stood and cleared his throat. "Boys, as you know, Miss Hayes here will be handling all your mending and sewing needs. Tomorrow morning, I want you to gather up everything that needs fixing and bring it to the main house. She will set up a workspace in the spare room off the kitchen." A chorus of acknowledgments followed, and then the men began to disperse. Some headed back to their bunks while others settled into chairs near the fireplace to smoke their pipes and play cards. Martha helped Clara clear the dishes, carrying them to the large sink where hot water was already waiting. Through the window above the basin, she could see several of the cowboys heading toward the corrals, and among them was Zachary, walking with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own body. "Zach's a quiet one," Clara said, following Martha's gaze. "He has been here 3 years, and I still do not think I have heard him say more than 10 words at a time, but Father says he is the best hand he has ever employed. The horses trust him like no one else." "Where is he from?" Clara shrugged. "He never talks about before." "Some of the boys say he must be running from something, but Father says a man's past is his own business as long as he does his work and treats others right." That night, lying in her new bed, Martha stared at the ceiling and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of the windmill, the occasional nicker of a horse, and somewhere out there, 12 cowboys who needed her skills. She thought of Zachary's gray eyes and the way he had looked at her across the crowded bunkhouse. Not with the frank appraisal some of the other men had given her, weighing her youth and unmarried status. His gaze had been different, curious perhaps, cautious certainly. But there had been something else there too, something that made her want to know more about the quiet cowboy who kept himself apart. Morning came early on the ranch. Martha woke to the sound of roosters and the distant ring of the triangle bell calling the men to breakfast. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where Clara was already pulling biscuits from the oven. "The men eat at 5:30, Clara explained. We usually eat after, but you are welcome to join them if you prefer. I will eat with you and your father, Martha said, helping to set the table. It would not be proper otherwise. After breakfast, the cowboys began arriving at the main house with their mending. They came in groups of 2 or 3, arms laden with worn shirts, torn trousers, and socks that were more whole than fabric. Martha set up her workspace in the spare room, a bright area with good light from 2 large windows. Tommy was first, dumping an impressive pile of damaged clothing on her work table. I am rough on clothes, he admitted sheepishly. Ma always said I could tear up an anvil. Frank and Pete brought matching shirts that needed buttons replaced and seams reinforced. Old Charlie's contribution included a pair of long johns that made Martha blush at the number of repairs they required. Jake presented his shirts with a theatrical bow that made her laugh. Each man came and went, some lingering to chat, others dropping their items and hurrying back to their duties. The pile on her work table grew steadily larger until Martha began to wonder if she had vastly underestimated the scope of this position. The sun was high when the door opened one more time and Zachary stepped in, hat in hand. He had clearly waited until all the others had finished, and he stood in the doorway as if uncertain whether he should proceed. "Come in," Martha said, setting down the shirt she had been examining. "I promise I do not bite." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile but close. He stepped inside and placed a small bundle on the edge of the table, as far from her as possible while still being on the same surface. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she expected, with a rough quality that suggested it did not get much use. Martha reached for the bundle and unwrapped it carefully. Inside were 3 shirts, all of them in better condition than most of what she had received. The tiers were clean, the fabric less worn. But what caught her attention was the careful way they had been folded, and a small piece of paper tucked into the top shirt. She unfolded the paper and read the neat handwriting. The blue shirt has a torn shoulder seam. The gray one needs the right cuff repaired. The tan one has a rip along the left side. "Thank you for your time, Zachary Dalton." When she looked up, he was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You did not need to write it down," she said. "You could have told me." He shook his head slightly. "Easier this way." "Why?" For a long moment, he just looked at her, and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Words do not come easy to me, Miss Hayes. Never have. I say the wrong thing or nothing at all, so I learned it is better to write when it matters." There was something achingly honest in his admission, and Martha found herself wanting to know everything about this man who guarded his words so carefully. "I understand," she said softly. "My father used to say that some people are loud rivers and others are deep wells. Both hold water, just in different ways." Zachary's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time she saw his shoulders relax. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was. He passed 3 months ago. I am sorry." "Thank you." She carefully refolded his shirts. "I will have these ready in a few days. Your clothes are in much better shape than most. You must take good care of them. Only have 3 shirts. Have to make them last." The simple statement revealed more than he probably intended. Most of the cowboys had 5 or 6 shirts in rotation. 3 meant money was tight, or that he was sending wages elsewhere, or that he simply did not spend anything on himself. "I will make sure they are done well," Martha promised. He nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the door. Without looking back, he said, "Welcome to the ranch, Miss Hayes. I hope you will be happy here." Then he was gone, leaving Martha staring at the empty doorway and wondering why those few words from him meant more than all the cheerful greetings she had received from the others combined. The days fell into a rhythm. Martha woke early and worked until the light failed. her needle flying through fabric as she repaired the endless damage that hard ranch work inflicted on clothes. Clara brought her meals and company, chattering about ranch life and the cowboys and her hopes of eventually going to San Francisco to see the opera. Mr. Drummond checked in periodically, always polite and professional, making sure she had everything she needed. He was a good man, she decided, still grieving his wife but doing his best to raise his daughter and run his ranch with integrity. The cowboys came and went, picking up their mended items and inevitably bringing more. Martha learned their patterns and personalities. Tommy was clumsy but good-hearted. Frank and Pete bickered like an old married couple. Jake told terrible jokes. Old Charlie was full of stories about the old days when California was still wild and untamed, and Zachary stayed distant. She saw him at meals, always at the same spot at the far end of the table, eating quickly and quietly before slipping away. She saw him in the corrals working with horses, his movements patient and sure. She saw him riding out at dawn and returning at dusk, his hat pulled low and his shoulders squared against whatever burdens he carried. But she did not speak to him again until a week after she arrived. She was walking back from the bunkhouse after delivering a stack of mended clothes when she heard shouting from the corral. Several cowboys were gathered around the fence, watching something inside. Martha hurried over, afraid someone was hurt. Inside the corral, a large bay horse was bucking and twisting, trying to dislodge the rider on its back. But the rider moved with the animal's rhythm, anticipating each direction change, staying centered and balanced. It was Zachary, and he looked like he had been born in the saddle. The horse finally stopped bucking and stood trembling, sides heaving. Zachary immediately relaxed his seat and leaned forward to pat the animal's neck, speaking too quietly for Martha to hear the words. After a few minutes, he urged the horse into a walk, then a trot, circling the corral with the animal responding to the slightest pressure from his legs or shift in his weight. "That horse killed a man 2 months ago," a voice said beside her, and Martha turned to find Dutch leaning against the fence. "Belonged to a rancher up north who was going to shoot it. Zach asked the boss if he could bring it here instead, said he could gentle it. It looks dangerous. Was. Still is in the wrong hands. But Zach has a gift. He understands what they are thinking, what they are afraid of. He has been working with that bay every day for 6 weeks. This is the first time he has stayed on for a full ride." Martha watched as Zachary brought the horse back to a walk and then carefully dismounted. He kept his hand on the animal's neck, still talking, still reassuring. The horse's ears flicked back and forth, listening. Why would he risk his life for a horse that killed someone? She asked. Dutch was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because he knows what it is like to be judged for one bad moment. To have people think you are nothing but trouble without bothering to see what is underneath." Before Martha could ask what he meant, Dutch pushed away from the fence and headed back toward the barn, leaving her with more questions than answers. That night at supper, Jake was telling a story about a cattle drive he had been on years ago when rustlers had attacked in the night. The other cowboys were listening with rapt attention, even though Martha suspected they had heard the tale before. She noticed that Zachary was not at his usual spot. "Where is Zach?" she asked Clara quietly. "He took his plate and went out. He does that sometimes when the bunkhouse gets too loud. Father says he needs his solitude." After the meal, Martha stepped outside for some air. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. She walked toward the corrals, drawn by the quiet and the need to think. She found Zachary sitting on the top rail of the fence, his empty plate beside him, staring out at the dark shapes of the horses in the pasture beyond. He must have heard her approach, but he did not acknowledge her presence. "I saw you with the bay horse today," Martha said, climbing up to sit on the fence a few feet away from him. "Dutch said it killed a man." "Stomped a cowboy who was beating it with a whip," Zachary said. "Horse was defending itself, does not make it a killer." Most people would not see it that way. Most people do not look past the surface. Martha turned to study his profile in the starlight. "Is that why you keep to yourself? Because people do not look past the surface." He was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "I came to California 5 years ago from Missouri. Left behind some trouble I had made for myself. Started over with a new name in a place where nobody knew me. Thought that would be enough. But it was not. Turns out you carry your past with you no matter how far you run. The things I did, the mistakes I made, they are still here." He tapped his chest over his heart. "Some days they are so loud I can barely hear anything else." Martha's throat tightened. "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that hurt people who did not deserve it. The kind you cannot take back." "Did you kill someone?" "No." He turned to look at her fully for the first time, and the pain in his eyes stole her breath. "But I might as well have. My actions led to someone's death just the same." She wanted to ask more, wanted to understand, but she could see that he had already shared more than he intended. So instead she said, "My father used to tell me that mistakes are only permanent if we refuse to learn from them, that every sunrise is a chance to choose differently." "Your father sounds like he was a good man." "He was. He also made mistakes, big ones. He drank too much after my mother died, and he neglected his practice. People suffered because he was not there when they needed him. But he stopped drinking eventually, and he spent the rest of his life trying to make amends." Zachary looked back out at the dark pasture. "Did it work, the amends?" "I think so. He died with friends around him and people who forgave him. That is more than some folks get." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch settling around them. Finally, Zachary said, "Thank you for mending my shirts. They look better than when I bought them." "You are welcome. Although I noticed you only have 3. If you would like, I could make you a new one. I have some extra fabric I brought with me." "I could not ask you to do that." "You are not asking. I am offering." He turned to her again, studying her face as if trying to determine whether she was being genuine. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. "That would be kind of you, Miss Hayes. Martha, please call me Martha. Martha." He said her name carefully like he was tasting something precious. "I am Zachary, but most folks call me Zach. I like Zachary better." "It suits you." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile if he had let it fully form. "Then Zachary it is, for you." Something warm bloomed in Martha's chest, and she found herself smiling back. They talked for another hour, the longest conversation she suspected Zachary had had in years. He told her about the horses he worked with, the satisfaction of earning an animal's trust. She told him about learning to sew from her mother, the meditative quality of needle and thread creating something whole from pieces. When she finally climbed down from the fence and headed back to the house, she felt lighter than she had in months. And when she glanced back over her shoulder, Zachary was still sitting there, watching her go with something in his expression that looked almost like hope. The next morning, Martha began cutting fabric for a new shirt. She chose a deep blue cotton that would bring out Zachary's eyes and set to work with extra care. This was not just mending. This was creation, and she wanted it to be perfect. Over the following weeks, she and Zachary fell into an easy pattern. He began staying later at meals, positioning himself closer to where she sat. They developed a habit of meeting at the corral fence in the evenings, talking until the stars came out. He showed her how to read a horse's body language, how to approach without frightening them. She taught him a card game her father had loved, and discovered that Zachary had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. The other cowboys noticed, of course. Tommy teased them good-naturedly until Frank told him to mind his own business. Dutch watched with approval. Jake made sure to save them seats together at meals. Even Mr. Drummond seemed pleased by the development, though he said nothing directly. Clara was delighted. "I knew it," she told Martha one afternoon while they were kneading bread together. "I knew you would be good for him. He has been alone too long." "We are just friends," Martha protested, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. "For now maybe, but I see how he looks at you, like you are water and he has been walking through the desert." Martha's hands stilled in the dough. Was that true? Did Zachary look at her that way? And if he did, what did it mean? She had her answer 3 days later when she finished his new shirt. She found him in the barn after supper, brushing down one of the horses. He looked up when she entered, and his entire face softened. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the carefully wrapped package. He set down the brush and wiped his hands on his trousers before taking the package. He unwrapped it slowly, his movements reverent, and when he saw the shirt his breath caught. "Martha, this is too fine. I cannot accept this." "Yes, you can. I made it for you." He held it up, examining the neat seams and careful stitching, the collar she had reinforced and the buttons she had sewn on with extra thread. Then he looked at her, and there were tears in his eyes. "No one has made me anything since my mother died when I was 12, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." But he shook his head and carefully folded the shirt before setting it aside. Then he took a step toward her, and another, until he was standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I should have told you before now, but I was afraid." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What is it?" "My real name is not Zachary Dalton. It is Zachary Donovan. I changed it when I came to California because I was running from what I had done." He took a shaky breath. "When I was 21, I worked on a ranch in Missouri. There was a girl there, the rancher's daughter. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was engaged to a man her father had chosen for her. But she and we fell in love, or at least I thought it was love." Martha waited, not daring to move or speak. "She wanted to run away with me, said she would rather live poor and free than rich and trapped. So we made plans to leave in the middle of the night to head west and start over, but her father found out." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "He came after us with some of his men. There was a confrontation. Elizabeth tried to get between us, tried to stop her father from shooting me. He pushed her and she fell, hit her head on a rock." "Oh, Zachary," Martha breathed. "She died 3 days later without ever waking up. Her father told everyone I had kidnapped her, that I was responsible for her death. There were wanted posters with my name and face. I ran. Changed my name, came to California, and spent the last 5 years trying to become someone different, someone better." He finally met her eyes, and the anguish in his gaze was almost more than she could bear. "But I am still the same man who got that girl killed. I am still carrying that guilt. And you need to know that before this goes any further." "Before what goes any further?" she asked softly. "Before I tell you that I am falling in love with you, that I have been falling since the moment you walked into that bunkhouse and looked at me like I was worth looking at. That you make me want to believe I could be worthy of something good again." His voice broke. "But I am not sure I am, Martha. I am not sure a man with my past deserves a woman like you." Martha's vision blurred with tears. She closed the distance between them and took his hands in hers, feeling them tremble. "Listen to me, Zachary Donovan," she said firmly. "What happened to Elizabeth was a tragedy, but it was not your fault. Her father was responsible for pushing her. You were trying to help someone you cared about escape a life she did not want. That does not make you a villain. I should have found another way, should have been smarter about it. Probably. But you were young and in love, and you made the best choice you could with what you knew at the time. She squeezed his hands. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago. I see the man you are now. The man who risks his life to save a horse that everyone else gave up on. The man who treats everyone with respect and works harder than anyone on this ranch. The man who writes notes because he wants to get his words right. That is who you are, Zachary, not your past mistakes but your present choices. I do not deserve you, he whispered. Maybe not, but I do not care, because I am falling in love with you too. His eyes widened, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. She wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his chest, hearing the thunder of his heartbeat beneath her ear. I am afraid, he admitted into her hair. Afraid I will mess this up too, afraid I will hurt you without meaning to. Then we will be afraid together, she said. But we will also be brave together, and we will figure it out as we go. He pulled back just enough to look down at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Then he cupped her cheek with one calloused hand and slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle and tentative, a question more than a statement. Martha answered by rising on her toes and kissing him back, pouring 5 weeks of growing feelings into the press of her lips against his. He made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, his other hand coming up to frame her face like she was something precious and fragile. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. I have been wanting to do that for weeks, he admitted. What took you so long? Fear? Stupidity? Take your pick. She laughed and felt him smile against her skin. They stood there in the quiet barn, wrapped in each other's arms while the horses shuffled in their stalls and the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night filtered through the walls. Finally, Zachary said, I should walk you back to the house. It is getting late and Mr. Drummond will worry. He might, Martha agreed, but she made no move to step away. Zachary chuckled and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Come on before I forget my good intentions entirely. They walked back to the house hand in hand, not speaking but not needing to. Words had never been easy for Zachary, but this silent communication spoke volumes. At the porch steps, he brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Thank you, he said. For the shirt, for listening, for seeing me. Thank you for letting me. She watched him walk back toward the bunkhouse, his new shirt tucked under his arm, and knew that something fundamental had shifted in her world. She had come to this ranch to mend clothes and earn a living. She had not expected to fall in love. But here she was, her heart full and her future suddenly bright with possibilities she had not dared to imagine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Zachary wore his new blue shirt to church on Sunday and fielded good-natured, teasing from the other cowboys about cleaning up so nice. Martha caught him looking at her during the sermon, and when she smiled at him, he smiled back without hesitation. They stole moments together whenever they could. Early morning meetings at the corral before the rest of the ranch woke up. Quiet conversations on the porch after supper, while Clara and Mr. Drummond tactfully gave them privacy. Walks out to watch the sunset, hands intertwined and shoulders brushing. Zachary opened up more, telling her about his childhood in Missouri, his mother's death, his distant father who had never quite known what to do with a quiet, bookish son. She told him about her own childhood, the joy of her early years before her mother's death, the slow, painful decline of her father's practice and health. We are a fine pair, Zachary said one evening as they sat on a fallen log near the creek that ran through the property. Two people shaped by loss trying to figure out how to build something new. I think loss teaches us to appreciate what we have, Martha said, to not take good things for granted. He turned to her, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. I do not take you for granted, Martha Hayes. Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that has happened to me in longer than I can remember. You are the best thing that has happened to me too. He kissed her then, slow and sweet, and she felt the last of her doubts melt away. This was real. This was right. Whatever challenges they might face, they would face them together. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the start of the fall roundup. The ranch became a flurry of activity as the cowboys prepared to gather the cattle from the far pastures and drive them closer to the ranch for the winter. Mr. Drummond announced that they would need all hands for the next 2 weeks, which meant long days and hard work. I hate that I will not see you as much, Zachary told Martha the night before they left, but I will be thinking of you. I will be here when you get back, she promised. And I will keep busy with mending. The boys have been bringing me things all week, trying to get them fixed before they leave. He kissed her goodnight at the porch steps, lingering longer than usual, as if trying to memorize the feel of her in his arms. Then he was gone, riding out with the others at dawn while Martha stood on the porch and waved goodbye. The house felt empty without the usual bustle of cowboys coming and going. Martha threw herself into her work, mending the enormous pile of clothes that had accumulated. Clara kept her company, and in the evenings, Mr. Drummond joined them for quiet dinners. On the third night, Mr. Drummond cleared his throat and said, "Miss Hayes, I wanted to speak with you about Zachary." Martha's heart skipped. "Yes, sir. I have noticed that you two have become close. I want you to know that I approve. Zachary is a good man, one of the best I have ever employed. He works hard, treats others with respect, and I trust him completely." "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal." "However," Mr. Drummond continued, "I also want you to know that if his intentions are serious, which I believe they are, I would expect him to speak to me before making any formal promises. It is not that I consider myself your guardian, but you are living under my roof, and I feel some responsibility for your welfare." "I understand," Martha said, touched by his concern, "but I can assure you that Zachary's intentions are entirely honorable. He is the most decent man I have ever known." Mr. Drummond smiled. "That is what I thought. I just wanted to say my piece. My wife would have insisted on it, and I try to do right by her memory." Clara, who had been quiet through this exchange, suddenly burst out, "Oh, I am so happy. I knew you two would be perfect together." "Wait until you are married, Martha. It will be wonderful having you as part of the family officially." "Clara," her father said gently, "do not rush them." But Martha was smiling too, because the future Clara painted sounded wonderful indeed. The cowboys returned 10 days later, dusty and tired but in good spirits. The roundup had gone well, and Mr. Drummond was pleased with the count. Martha watched from the porch as they rode in, her eyes scanning the group until she spotted Zachary near the back. He saw her at the same moment, and his face transformed. As soon as he had dismounted and turned his horse over to Tommy, he strode across the yard to the porch, not seeming to care who was watching. "I missed you," he said, pulling her into his arms right there in front of everyone. "I missed you too," she said, breathing in the scent of him, horse and leather and sweat and something uniquely Zachary. Behind them, someone whistled and another cowboy whooped. Zachary ignored them completely, too focused on holding Martha close. That night after supper, he asked if she would take a walk with him. They headed toward the creek, the moon bright enough to light their path. When they reached their usual spot on the fallen log, Zachary did not sit down. Instead, he took both her hands in his and looked at her with such intensity that her breath caught. "Martha, I need to ask you something, and I have been practicing what I want to say for the last 10 days, but I am still afraid I will mess it up." "You could never mess anything up with me," she said softly. He took a deep breath. "I know we have only known each other for 2 months. I know that is not very long, but I also know that you are the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. You make me believe I can be better than I was. You make me want to be better. When I was out there on the range, all I could think about was getting back here to you." Martha's heart was pounding so hard she was surprised he could not hear it. "I do not have much to offer you," he continued. "I make decent wages, but I have not saved much. I have a past that might catch up to me someday. I am not good with words, and I probably never will be. But I love you, Martha Hayes. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone, and I am asking if you would consider marrying me. If you would consider building a life with a quiet cowboy who will probably never be rich or famous, but who will spend every day trying to make you happy." Tears were streaming down Martha's face, but she was smiling so wide it hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I do not care about money or fame or any of that. I just want you, Zachary, exactly as you are." He let out a shaky laugh that might have been a sob and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of how afraid he had been that she might say no. She kissed him back just as fiercely, trying to convey that she would never say no to him, not in a million years. When they finally broke apart, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was a ring, simple gold with a small blue stone set in the center. "It was my mother's," he said. "The only thing of hers I kept when I left Missouri. I want you to have it if you will take it." "It is beautiful," Martha whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They sat on the log then, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans for their future. They would marry in the spring, after the winter months had passed and the ranch work slowed down. They would live in one of the small cabins on the property that Mr. Drummond had said they could use. Zachary would continue working with the horses, maybe start a breeding program if the boss approved. Martha would keep mending for the ranch, but could also take in work from the town if she wanted. "We will have a good life," Zachary said. "It might not be fancy, but it will be ours." "That is all I want," Martha assured him. "A life with you is more than I ever hoped for." They told Mr. Drummond and Clara the next morning. The rancher shook Zachary's hand and welcomed him to the family, while Clara squealed with delight and immediately began planning the wedding. The other cowboys congratulated them at supper that night, with Jake insisting on making a toast with their coffee cups since they had no whiskey in the bunkhouse. "To Zach and Martha," Jake said, holding his cup high. "May they be as happy as two people can be, and may they never run out of thread or patience, whichever runs out first." Everyone laughed and drank, and Martha felt the warmth of community wrap around her like a blanket. These men, rough and weathered as they were, had become like family. This ranch had become home, and the quiet man sitting beside her, holding her hand under the table where no one could see, had become her whole world. Winter settled over the ranch with surprisingly little snow but plenty of cold winds that kept everyone close to the fires. Martha spent her days sewing, not just mending now but creating. She made new curtains for their future cabin. She sewed quilts from scraps of fabric, piecing together patterns that would keep them warm. She made a dress for her wedding, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs that Clara helped her stitch. Zachary spent his days working with the horses, breaking the young ones and training them for ranch work. He had a gift for it, a patience that seemed endless. Martha would watch him sometimes from the window of her workroom, marveling at the way he moved, the way the animals responded to him. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire in the main house. Zachary reading aloud from the newspapers Mr. Drummond received from San Francisco while Martha sewed. He still was not comfortable with long conversations in groups, but alone with her, he opened up more and more. He told her about his dreams of breeding horses that would be known throughout California. She told him about maybe teaching Clara and other girls in the area to sew, passing on the skills her mother had taught her. Christmas came and went with a celebration in the bunkhouse. Martha gave Zachary a new hat she had saved wages to buy, and he gave her a music box he had ordered from San Francisco, tiny and perfect, that played a waltz when she opened it. "I remember you saying your mother had one," he said as she turned it over in her hands, tears in her eyes. "I thought you might like your own." "It is perfect," she whispered. "Everything about you is perfect." January brought hard freezes and one significant snowstorm that left them all trapped inside for 3 days. Zachary spent most of that time in the main house rather than the bunkhouse, helping Mr. Drummond with paperwork and ledgers while Martha and Clara cooked enough food to feed an army. On the second night of the storm, when Clara and Mr. Drummond had gone to bed, Martha and Zachary sat together on the couch, his arm around her shoulders and her head on his chest. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "Do you ever regret coming here?" "Never," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I am supposed to be." "I used to think I did not deserve to be happy," he admitted. "That what happened with Elizabeth meant I should spend the rest of my life alone, punishing myself. But you changed that. You made me see that maybe I could have something good. That maybe I could be someone good. You were always someone good, Zachary. You just needed to believe it yourself." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "4 more months and you will be my wife." "I cannot wait. Neither can I." February brought the first signs of spring, with green shoots pushing through the cold ground and the cattle becoming restless in their winter pastures. The ranch stirred back to life, and with it came more work and longer days. Martha finished her wedding dress and hung it carefully in the wardrobe. She had also made Zachary a new shirt and vest for the ceremony, deep charcoal gray that would make his eyes look like silver. Clara was making a cake, practicing her recipe until she got it just right. March arrived with rain that turned the roads to mud and made everyone irritable. But Martha did not care. She marked off each day on the calendar Clara had given her, counting down to the wedding. It was during one of these rainy afternoons, while Martha was sewing and Zachary was repairing tack in the barn, that a rider came up the road to the ranch. He was dressed in a suit despite the mud, and he rode with the posture of someone used to authority. Mr. Drummond met him at the door, and Martha could hear their voices but not their words. After a few minutes, Mr. Drummond called for Zachary. Martha's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. She set down her sewing and moved to the doorway of her workroom where she could see into the main room. Zachary came in from the barn, muddy and wet, his expression cautious when he saw the stranger. The man looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Are you Zachary Donovan?" Martha saw every muscle in Zachary's body tense. "I am Zachary Dalton. Your real name is Donovan. You are from Missouri, and there are outstanding warrants for your arrest in connection with the death of Elizabeth Hartley 5 years ago." "Who are you?" Mr. Drummond demanded. "My name is Thomas Hartley. Elizabeth was my sister." The man's voice cracked slightly. "And I need to speak with Mr. Donovan alone." Martha could not stop herself. She stepped into the room, moving to Zachary's side and taking his hand. He looked down at her in surprise, then tried to gently push her away. "Martha, you should not be here for this. I am not leaving you." Thomas Hartley looked between them, his expression unreadable. "You are together. We are engaged," Martha said, lifting her chin. "We are to be married in 2 months. I see." Hartley took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. Mr. Donovan, I owe you an apology, a significant one. Zachary went very still. I do not understand. May we sit down? This is a long story, and I have ridden a long way to tell it. They moved to the sitting room, Martha refusing to let go of Zachary's hand. Mr. Drummond stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, clearly ready to defend his employee if needed. Hartley sat in the chair across from them and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. After Elizabeth died, my father was consumed with grief and rage. He convinced himself that you had kidnapped her, that you were responsible for her death. He pushed for warrants, offered rewards, did everything in his power to find you and see you hang. Hartley's voice was heavy with regret. I believed him. We all did. But after he died 6 months ago, my mother finally told me the truth. What truth? Zachary's voice was barely a whisper. That Elizabeth had been planning to run away for months. That she had begged father to let her break off the engagement to Charles, but he refused because Charles's family had land he wanted. That she had fallen in love with you and was desperate to escape. Hartley looked up, his eyes red. My father knew all of this. He knew Elizabeth was unhappy. He knew she wanted to leave, but he would not allow it because it would have damaged his business prospects. And when she tried to run anyway and the confrontation happened, he blamed you instead of accepting his own responsibility. Zachary was trembling beside Martha. She died because I was not smart enough to find another way. No, Hartley said firmly. She died because my father pushed her during an argument. The doctor confirmed that the head injury was consistent with a fall, and multiple witnesses saw what really happened. But father paid them to stay quiet, and he used his influence to make sure the story was that you had kidnapped her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. These are signed statements from those witnesses, all of them recanting their previous testimony. There are also letters from Elizabeth's diary that make it clear she loved you and chose to leave of her own free will. And this is a letter from the county judge in Missouri dismissing all charges against you. You are a free man, Mr. Donovan. Your name is cleared. The envelope fell to the floor as Zachary buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, 5 years of guilt and fear finally breaking free. Martha wrapped her arms around him, holding him while he wept, her own tears streaming down her face. Why did you come all this way? Mr. Drummond asked Hartley. You could have sent those papers. Because I needed to apologize in person, Hartley said, his own voice thick with emotion. I spent 2 years searching for him, but Mr. Donovan had hidden his tracks well. It was only last month that a private detective found a lead that brought me here, and I needed him to know that Elizabeth would not have wanted him to carry this guilt. She would have wanted him to live, to be happy, to find love again. He looked at Martha. It seems he has done that. He has, Martha said, holding Zachary tighter, and he will continue to do so for the rest of his life. Hartley stood and picked up the envelope, setting it on the table beside Zachary. Everything you need is in there. You can reclaim your real name if you want. You can go back to Missouri if you want, though I do not know why you would, or you can stay here and build the life you have started. Whatever you choose, you are free. He put his hat back on and headed toward the door, but Zachary's voice stopped him. Wait. Hartley turned back. Zachary had lifted his head, his face wet but his expression composed. Thank you, Zachary said, for coming here, for telling me the truth, for caring enough about your sister's memory to do the right thing even after all this time. It was the least I could do. Hartley paused. For what it is worth, Elizabeth wrote about you in her diary. She said you were the kindest man she had ever known, that you saw her as a person rather than a possession. She loved you very much. I am sorry my father did not give you a chance to love her openly. I am sorry she died so young. So am I. Hartley nodded to Mr. Drummond and Martha. Take care of him. He is a good man. Then he was gone, riding back down the muddy road toward town, leaving behind the papers that would change Zachary's life. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mr. Drummond said quietly, I will leave you two alone, and slipped out of the room. Martha turned to Zachary, cupping his face in her hands. How do you feel? I do not know, he admitted. Lighter, maybe, like something that was crushing me has finally lifted, but also strange. I have been carrying that guilt for so long I am not sure who I am without it. You are the same man you were this morning, the same man I fell in love with, the same man who is going to marry me in 2 months and build a life here on this ranch. Nothing has changed except now you do not have to be afraid anymore. Everything has changed, he said, but he was smiling through his tears. I am free, Martha. After 5 years of running and hiding and hating myself, I am finally free. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his relief and joy and love into the press of his mouth against hers. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I want to use my real name again, he said. I want to marry you as Zachary Donovan, the person I really am, not the person I was pretending to be. Then that is what we will do. They told the others that night at supper. The cowboys listened in stunned silence as Zachary explained everything, leaving nothing out. When he finished, Jake was the first to speak. So you are telling us that for 3 years we have been calling you by the wrong name? Yes. Well, hell, Zach, you could have just said so. We would not have cared. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. He is right. We all have things in our past we are not proud of. That is why most of us ended up out here in the first place. One by one, the other cowboys echoed the sentiment. Dutch clapped Zachary on the shoulder and said, Takes courage to tell the truth. I am glad you finally could. Mr. Drummond raised his coffee cup. To Zachary Donovan, a good man who has earned his freedom and his fresh start, may the rest of his life be as happy as he deserves. Hear, hear, the cowboys chorused, and Zachary ducked his head, overwhelmed by the acceptance and support. That night, walking Martha back to the main house, he said, I never imagined it could be like this, that people would know the truth and not judge me for it. That is because you surrounded yourself with good people, and because you have proven through your actions who you really are. I feel like I can finally breathe, he admitted. Like I have been holding my breath for 5 years and just now remembered how to exhale. Then breathe, Zachary Donovan. Breathe and live and be happy. We both deserve that. The next 2 months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Mr. Drummond filed the paperwork to officially change Zachary's name back to Donovan in the California records. The small cabin on the property was cleaned and furnished, ready for the newlyweds to move into after the wedding. Martha finished her dress and Zachary's suit. Clara perfected her cake recipe and recruited the cowboys to help decorate the bunkhouse for the reception. On a bright Saturday morning in early May, with wildflowers blooming across the hills and the sky a perfect cloudless blue, Martha Hayes married Zachary Donovan in front of their ranch family and a few friends from town. The ceremony was simple, held outside near the creek where they had spent so many evenings talking and dreaming. Mr. Drummond gave Martha away, and Clara stood beside her as her maid of honor. Dutch stood beside Zachary as his best man. When the preacher asked if Zachary took Martha to be his wife, his voice rang out clear and strong. I do. And when Martha said the same, she thought her heart might burst from happiness. Their first kiss as husband and wife was sweet and tender, and when they turned to face their friends, everyone was cheering and throwing flower petals that Clara had carefully collected that morning. The reception in the bunkhouse was lively and full of laughter. Jake told embarrassing stories about Zachary that made everyone howl. Tommy performed a terrible but enthusiastic fiddle solo. The cake was delicious, and Martha fed Zachary a piece with frosting on his nose, which made him laugh in that way he only did with her. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Zachary took Martha's hand and led her away from the bunkhouse toward their new cabin. Someone had lit lanterns inside, and the soft light spilled out onto the porch. Zachary carried her over the threshold, and she laughed at the tradition of it all. He set her down gently in the middle of their front room and just looked at her for a long moment. "What?" she asked, suddenly shy. "You are my wife," he said, wonder in his voice. "After everything, all the running and hiding and guilt, I am standing here in a home with a woman I love who chose to marry me. Sometimes I think I am going to wake up and find this was all a dream." "It is not a dream," she assured him, stepping close and wrapping her arms around his waist. "This is real. We are real, and we have the rest of our lives to figure out how to be happy together." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she melted into him. They had been careful before the wedding, never being fully alone, always maintaining propriety. But now they were married, and the night stretched before them full of promise. "I love you, Martha Donovan," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Zachary Donovan." He swept her into his arms again and carried her to their bedroom, kicking the door shut behind them. Whatever happened next was theirs alone, a private beginning to their shared life. The ranch settled into a new rhythm with the newlyweds living in the cabin. Martha still did mending for the Cowboys, but now she worked from home, setting up her sewing corner near the window where she could watch Zachary work with the horses. He came home for lunch every day, stealing kisses and making her laugh. Mr. Drummond approved Zachary's proposal to start a breeding program, investing in 2 quality mares and a stallion with good bloodlines. Zachary's dream of raising horses known throughout California began to take shape. Summer brought long, hot days and the first signs that Martha was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening as they sat on their porch watching the stars come out. He went very still, then pulled her into his lap and held her like she was made of glass. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. He kissed her, then her stomach, then her again. "I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I might burst." "Good," she said, laughing, "because this baby is going to need a father who is all of those things." Their son was born the following March, during a late-night thunderstorm that had Zachary pacing the floor of their cabin while the midwife from town helped Martha through labor. When he finally heard his son's first cry, he burst into the bedroom and fell to his knees beside the bed. "He is perfect," Martha said, exhausted but glowing as she held the tiny bundle. "Just like his father." Zachary touched his son's tiny hand with one finger, marveling at how impossibly small he was. "What should we name him?" They had discussed this many times, but Martha said, "I was thinking Daniel after Mr. Drummond. He gave us both a home when we needed one." "Daniel Donovan," Zachary said, testing it out. "I like it." Mr. Drummond cried when they told him, and Clara insisted on spoiling her honorary nephew with clothes and toys. The Cowboys took turns visiting to meet the baby, each of them awkward and gentle in their own way. Life continued to unfold in ways Martha had never dared to dream. Daniel grew into a sturdy toddler who followed his father everywhere, mimicking the way Zachary walked and talked. 2 years after Daniel came a daughter they named Hope, because that was what she represented. Hope for the future, hope for continued happiness, hope that the dark days were truly behind them. Zachary's breeding program flourished, with buyers coming from as far as Sacramento to purchase his horses. Martha's sewing business grew beyond just the ranch, with women from town bringing her work and young girls asking if she would teach them. She started holding classes twice a week in the bunkhouse, passing on her mother's skills to a new generation. Mr. Drummond eventually retired, turning the daily operations of the ranch over to Dutch, while he spent his time teaching Daniel and hoped to ride and telling them stories about their parents' courtship. Clara married Tommy in a ceremony that mirrored Martha and Zachary's, and they moved into another cabin on the property. Years passed, measured in seasons and harvests, birthdays and anniversaries. Daniel grew tall and serious like his father, with his mother's easy smile. Hope was all fire and laughter, charming everyone she met. A third child came, another son they named Thomas after the man who had traveled so far to give Zachary his freedom back. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Martha back to the spot by the creek where he had proposed. They sat on the same fallen log, older now and weathered by time just like them. "You ever think about how different our lives could have been?" Martha asked, leaning against his shoulder. "Sometimes," he admitted. "If you had not come to the ranch that September. If I had let fear keep me silent. If Elizabeth's brother had not come to clear my name, so many things could have gone differently. But they did not. We ended up exactly where we were supposed to be. I used to think I did not deserve happiness," Zachary said. "That I was meant to live alone, carrying my guilt until I died. But you taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, that mistakes do not define us forever if we learn from them and try to be better. You were always better than you believed, Zachary. I just helped you see it." He kissed her temple. "You gave me everything, Martha. A home, a family, a reason to believe in myself. I spent 5 years running from my past, and then you came along and showed me how to run toward my future instead." "We built that future together," she corrected. "And we will keep building it day by day for as long as we have." "I love you," he said, the words coming easier after a decade of practice. "More now than the day we married, if that is even possible." "It is possible," she assured him, "because I feel the same way." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. From the cabin, they could hear their children's laughter as Clara watched them for the evening. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney, where a new generation of cowboys shared meals and stories. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and enduring, a testament to the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. Zachary had come to California running from his past, carrying guilt and shame that nearly destroyed him. Martha had come looking for work and a fresh start, her own life marked by loss. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, a quiet cowboy and a seamstress who came to mend clothes. But in the end, they mended so much more than fabric. They mended hearts broken by tragedy, spirits crushed by guilt, and souls that had forgotten how to hope. They proved that the past does not have to determine the future, that love can grow even in the hardest soil, and that sometimes the quietest voices speak the most important truths. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Martha thought about the girl she had been stepping off that stagecoach in Angel's Camp, California, clutching her needle case and hoping for nothing more than honest work. She could never have imagined then that she would find so much more. A home, a family, a community, and a love story that would span decades. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, sensing her mood. "About how lucky I am," she said. "About how a simple advertisement in a newspaper changed my entire life." "Mine too," he said. "I almost did not come to supper that first night, almost stayed in the barn because I did not want to face a stranger. If I had, we might never have spoken. But you did come. You took that chance. Best decision I ever made." They walked back to their cabin hand in hand, the moon rising above them and the ranch settling in for the night. Inside, they would find their children waiting, eager for bedtime stories and goodnight kisses. They would tuck them in and blow out the lanterns, then curl up together in their own bed, still marveling after all these years at the miracle of finding each other. Zachary had asked Martha to mend his heart instead of just his clothes, and she had done exactly that. But the truth was, they had mended each other, two broken people becoming whole through love and patience and the everyday choice to build something beautiful together. And in the wild west of 1888, in a small cabin on a California cattle ranch, that was more than enough. It was everything. The following years brought more changes, as they always do. Daniel grew into a fine horseman, inheriting his father's gift with animals. At 19, he took over much of the breeding program, introducing new ideas and expanding their reputation even further. Hope, at 17, surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to study medicine and become a doctor. Though the path would be difficult for a woman, her parents supported her dreams and began saving to send her to San Francisco. Thomas, now 12, showed promise as a writer, filling notebooks with stories about ranch life and the characters who populated it. Zachary would often find him sitting in the barn or by the creek, scribbling away, and he would smile remembering his own younger self who had found solace in words. Clara and Tommy had 4 children of their own, and the ranch felt alive with the next generation. Mr. Drummond lived to see his grandchildren running through the fields where he had once worked so hard to build something lasting. He passed peacefully in his sleep at 78, surrounded by family, his final words a blessing on them all. Dutch took over as the ranch's patriarch, training young cowboys and maintaining the traditions that had made the Double D successful. Jake and old Charlie retired but stayed on the property in a small house Mr. Drummond had built for aging hands who had nowhere else to go. Frank and Pete eventually left to start their own ranch in Oregon, but they visited every few years, their friendship with the Donovans enduring across the distance. Martha's sewing school grew into something more, a place where young women could learn not just practical skills, but also business sense and independence. She taught them to value their work and charge fair prices, to see themselves as craftswomen rather than just women who sewed. Several of her students went on to open their own shops in nearby towns, always crediting Martha as their inspiration. On their 20th anniversary, Zachary surprised Martha with a trip to San Francisco. They stayed in a hotel with indoor plumbing and electric lights, marveling at how much the world had changed since they first met. They saw an opera, fulfilling Clara's old dream vicariously, and ate at restaurants where the menu was in French. But what Martha treasured most was simply walking through the city streets hand in hand with her husband. Window shopping and people watching and talking about everything and nothing. They were middle-aged now, graying and softening around the edges, but the love between them had only deepened with time. "You ever miss it?" Zachary asked one evening as they stood on their hotel balcony overlooking the city. The possibility of a different life. Something more glamorous than a ranch in Angel's Camp. "Never," Martha said firmly. "This city is exciting to visit, but it is not home. Home is our cabin with the porch where we watch sunsets. Home is the sound of our children's voices and the smell of hay in the barn, and the way you kiss me goodnight every single evening without fail. I would not trade that for all the glamour in the world." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I am a lucky man." "We are both lucky." They returned to the ranch renewed, grateful for the adventure but happier still to be back where they belonged. Life continued its steady rhythm, marked by seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. When the new century arrived in 1900, they celebrated with the whole ranch, marveling at having lived through so much change. The wild west of their youth was fading, replaced by railroads and telegraphs, automobiles beginning to appear on city streets, and talk of flying machines that seemed impossible but captured everyone's imagination. "The world is getting smaller," Zachary observed one night. "Faster, more connected." "But some things stay the same," Martha said. "People still need love. They still need family and community and purpose. They still need someone to teach them that their mistakes do not define them forever. You taught me that. We taught each other." Their children grew and made their own choices. Daniel married a girl from town and brought her to live on the ranch, building yet another cabin and beginning the cycle again with children of his own. Hope did go to San Francisco to study medicine, facing prejudice and barriers, but pushing through with the stubborn determination she had inherited from both parents. She eventually became a doctor serving mining communities, bringing modern medicine to places that desperately needed it. Thomas published his first book at 23, a collection of stories about ranch life that captured the spirit of a disappearing era. He dedicated it to his parents, writing in the inscription, "For my mother, who taught me to value words, and my father, who taught me to use them carefully." Martha and Zachary grew old together, their hair turning white and their steps slowing, but their love remaining constant. They had lived through more than most people experienced in 2 lifetimes: tragedy and redemption, fear and courage, loss and profound gain. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The bunkhouse was decorated with flowers and ribbons, and Clara had made another cake, this one proclaiming 40 years of love in careful frosting letters. Zachary stood to make a speech, still uncomfortable with public speaking but better at it after 4 decades of practice. "I am not a man of many words," he began, and everyone laughed because it had become his standard opening. "But I need to say this. 40 years ago, I was a broken man convinced I did not deserve happiness. Then Martha walked into my life and everything changed. She saw past my silence to who I really was. She loved me when I could not love myself. She built a home and a family with me and taught me that the future is always brighter than the past if you are brave enough to reach for it." He turned to Martha, his eyes shining with tears. "You mended my heart, and I have spent 40 years trying to deserve that gift. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise, for as long as we both shall live." The room erupted in applause and cheers, and Martha stood to kiss him, not caring that their grandchildren were giggling. When they sat back down, surrounded by the family and community they had built together, she felt nothing but gratitude. The story that had started with a young woman stepping off a stagecoach looking for work had become something beautiful. A legacy of love and resilience, passed down through generations. A testament to the power of second chances and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are rather than who they have been. As the party continued around them, Martha leaned into Zachary's side and whispered, "Thank you for asking me to mend your heart instead of just your clothes." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for saying yes to everything, every day for 40 years. And I will keep saying yes for as many days as we have left." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their family celebrate, and knew that they had gotten it right. The quiet cowboy and the seamstress, 2 broken people who had found each other in the Wild West and built something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. It was, Martha thought, the best story she could have ever imagined. And it was theirs. The years continued to pass. gentler now as Martha and Zachary settled into their golden years. They were in their 60s when illness first came for Zachary, a fever that left him weak for weeks. Martha nursed him back to health with the same patience and care she had shown everything in her life, and when he recovered, he held her hand and said, "I am not ready to leave you yet." "Good," she replied, "because I am not ready to let you go." They had another decade together after that, precious years spent watching their grandchildren grow and their great-grandchildren be born. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management, and the Donovan name became synonymous with quality horses throughout California. Martha's health began to fail in her mid-70s, her hands growing stiff with arthritis that made sewing difficult. It frustrated her until Zachary reminded her that she had already taught dozens of women to sew, that her legacy would continue through them. So she adapted, shifting her focus to planning and designing while her students did the detailed work. They celebrated their 50th anniversary surrounded by more than 100 people, all of them connected to the ranch or the Donovan family in some way. It was a testament to the community they had built, the lives they had touched, the love they had shared not just with each other but with everyone around them. When Zachary died at 76, peacefully in his sleep with Martha beside him, she grieved deeply but not hopelessly. They had discussed death many times over the years, preparing for the inevitable. He had made her promise not to lose herself in grief, to keep living and loving and teaching for as long as she could. "You gave me 49 years of happiness," she told his grave the day after the funeral. "That is more than most people get in 2 lifetimes. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything." She lived another 5 years, surrounded by family and purpose. She taught her great-granddaughters to sew and told them stories about the Wild West and the quiet cowboy who had stolen her heart. She wrote down her memories in notebooks that would eventually be passed down through generations, a family history full of love and redemption. On a warm spring morning in her 81st year, Martha sat on the porch of the cabin she had shared with Zachary for more than 5 decades. Her grandson Daniel sat beside her, now a man in his 50s himself, and they talked about the old days. "Tell me again about when you first met grandfather," he said, as he always did. So Martha told the story one more time, about stepping off the stagecoach in Angel's Camp with nothing but a needle case and hope, about a quiet cowboy who wrote her notes because words did not come easy, about falling in love in the Wild West and building a life that exceeded every dream. "He was the best man I ever knew," she finished, as she always did, "and I was blessed beyond measure to be his wife." That night, Martha went to sleep and did not wake up. The doctor said it was her heart, worn out from 8 decades of loving and giving and feeling. But those who knew her best said she had simply been ready, that Zachary had been waiting long enough. They buried her beside him on the hill overlooking the ranch, under an oak tree they had planted together 30 years earlier. The headstones read, "Zachary Donovan, 1852, 1928, beloved husband, father, grandfather, a quiet man who spoke volumes through love, Martha Hayes Donovan, 1856, 1937, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she mended more than clothes." The ranch continued, passing through generations but always remaining in the family. The cabin where Martha and Zachary had lived became a museum of sorts, preserved as a reminder of where the Donovan legacy had truly begun. School children would visit to learn about life in the Old West, and they would see Martha's sewing corner still set up by the window, needles and thread waiting as if she might walk in at any moment. And in a way, she did. Her spirit lived on in every woman who picked up a needle and thread, every young girl who believed she could be more than society told her she could be, every person who learned that mistakes did not have to define them forever. Zachary's legacy lived on too, in the horses that still bore the Donovan brand, in the quiet men who learned that strength could be gentle, and that words carefully chosen meant more than words carelessly thrown around. But their greatest legacy was simply this: that a seamstress who came to mend clothes and a cowboy who asked her to mend his heart instead had found each other in the rough and tumble world of the 1878 California Wild West, and together they had built something that lasted. A family, a community, a love story that would be told and retold for generations. They had proven that second chances were real, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the quietest stories were the ones worth telling the loudest. In Angel's Camp, California, on a ranch that still thrived more than a century after they had first met, Martha and Zachary's story lived on. And it would continue to live on, a testament to the enduring power of love, redemption, and the simple act of seeing someone for who they truly were, and choosing to walk beside them through whatever came next. It was, in the end, the perfect story. Not because it was easy or simple or without pain, but because it was real and hard-won and filled with the kind of love that changes everything it touches, the kind of love that lasts forever.